The sky wept in harmony with him. Cold raindrops mixed with the warm tears on his cheeks as Daniel stood outside the grand glass doors of St. James Hospital, his small, trembling hands clenched into fists. His mother lay inside, fighting for her life, and the doctors had made it clear, without immediate surgery, she wouldn't survive. But surgery cost money. More than he had ever seen in his 12 years of life. Daniel had tried everything, pleading with the hospital staff, knocking on neighbors' doors, even standing on the street with a cardboard sign that read, "Help me save my mom." Most people averted their gaze, unwilling to meet his desperate eyes. Some gave him loose change. But time was slipping away. And then, a miracle. A sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up to the hospital entrance. The driver stepped out and opened the door, revealing Richard Caldwell, one of the wealthiest businessmen in the country. The billionaire's presence was impossible to ignore, his tailored suit, his polished shoes, the air of power that surrounded him. Without thinking, Daniel ran. "Please, sir," he gasped, grabbing at Richard's sleeve. "My mom is dying. I need help. Please." The security guard moved toward the boy, but Richard held up a hand, stopping him. He looked down, his sharp blue eyes meeting Daniel's. "Calm down," Richard said, his voice controlled but not unkind. "Tell me what happened." Through hiccups and sobs, Daniel spilled his story. How his mother had collapsed at home. How she worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. How the doctors said she wouldn't make it without immediate surgery. Richard listened, his face unreadable. Then, he sighed. "Life isn't fair, kid. People suffer. It's just how the world works." Daniel's heart shattered. He had hoped, prayed, that this man, with his immense wealth, would help. But Richard was walking away. "Wait!" Daniel shouted, his voice breaking. "I don't want money. I just want my mom." That made the billionaire stop. Daniel's next words came out as a whisper. "Everyone says you're the richest man in the city. But are you rich enough to save a life?" The question lingered in the air, cutting through the rain. Something flickered in Richard's expression. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, something had changed. He turned to his driver. "Take the boy inside." Daniel didn't understand what was happening, but the next thing he knew, they were rushing into the hospital. The doctors, who had earlier dismissed him, were suddenly moving. The receptionist, who had told him there was "nothing we can do," was now making calls. Within minutes, his mother was being prepped for surgery. Hours passed. Daniel sat in the waiting room, his heart pounding. Richard Caldwell had disappeared. But when the surgeon finally walked out, his face was calm. "She made it," he said. "She's going to be okay." Daniel collapsed into the chair, overwhelmed with relief. "But how?" The doctor smiled. "A private donor covered the entire cost." Daniel blinked, his mind racing. And then, he saw him. Richard Caldwell stood by the window, gazing at the city lights. "You." Daniel whispered. Richard turned, his usual composure softened. "Your mother reminds me of someone," he admitted. "Someone who once worked herself to the bone so I could have a better life." Daniel swallowed hard. "My mother," Richard said, almost to himself. "I was just a little older than you when I lost her. But if someone had stepped in to save her, maybe my life would have been different." Silence stretched between them. "Thank you," Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. For the first time that night, Richard smiled. Not the rehearsed, businesslike smirk he gave at board meetings, but something real. "Take care of her," he said. "Family is the only real wealth we have." And with that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. A heart transformed. Years later, when Daniel stood on a stage accepting his medical degree, he thought of that night. The moment that had changed everything. Richard Caldwell had saved his mother, but he had done something even greater. He had saved Daniel's belief in humanity. And that, Daniel realized, was the richest gift of all. The lesson. Kindness is the wealth that truly matters. Sometimes, a single act of compassion can change a life forever.